Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maxi-Geek Show. Today is Friday, April 14th, and this is episode number 56. The Force is with us this week as we dive into a host of news and announcements from the recent Star Wars celebration in London. Beyond that, we're going to talk about a few games getting delayed and updates to some subscription services. We also got a new look this week at The Legend of Zelda and Final Fantasy 16. But first, we're going to go higher, further, teenagery with the first trailer for The Marvels. So this was shown off randomly during the week. There wasn't any sort of hype with it. Marvel just put it out on Good Morning America, as Disney like to do. They like to use, their big morning show on the network that they own to promote their own content. And this was one of the things they did this week. For obvious reasons, for those who don't want to spoil it, I will not play the trailer here now. I will, however, put it in the chat, so if you do want to view it, you can. The trailer does show off, Nick Fury in there, Monica Rambeau, Carol Danvers, and Camilla Khan. So that, the three characters from the various things all coming together. We didn't see any Ben Mendelsohn as a Skrull. So in terms of timeline, we don't know if this is set before Secret Invasion, which comes in June, or if it's set after Secret Invasion. If it's set after Secret Invasion, it's possible that means that Sam Jackson's Nick Fury survives whatever happens. If it's set beforehand, it's a whole nother thing. Who knows what will end up being the case there. But it is kind of cool that is out now as well. It also is a little weird because, we didn't get the first sort of Guardians teaser until just a few months out from that. Same with Ant-Man. But this one, this is middle of April, and this movie not out till the 9th of November. So we've got a fair way to go for that one, and we already have a teaser trailer. So it's kind of interesting they're doing it that way. Moving out of the world of the Marvels, we're going to go into the marvelous new trailer for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. So Nintendo announced 24 hours beforehand that they would be dropping a new trailer for Tears of the Kingdom, which comes out in a little under a month calendar-wise. It comes out on the 12th of May. This one is a purely, action-packed trailer. There's a few story elements, so again, I won't play it for spoiler reasons. We got our first sort of good look at Ganon though, which we've seen in the trailers previously. We got Link on a horse, we got Zelda talking to something in her hand, and there's a bit more combat and all that sort of stuff. So there is a lot more going on in the trailer than just those elements though, and they do lean towards spoiler territory story-wise, or major gameplay elements. So for obvious reasons, I won't play that. Being that Nintendo have said this is the final trailer for the game, don't expect a launch trailer or anything like that. However, do expect them to cut that trailer up into bite-sized bits for Twitter. So expect to see the same, 8-second clip, for the next few weeks over and over again from the various accounts. It's Nintendo's standard operating procedure, unfortunately. Unless there is a specific local event happening, like PAX Australia for Nintendo of Australia, or the recently announced Nintendo Live in Seattle, they tend to just have the same piece of content and just, they rotate it around, convert it to another language for a different region, all that sort of stuff. So just be aware of that one, that you will see the same things over and over again. Moving on from there, during the week, Frozen Byte announced a partnership with THQ to bring the world of Trine back in Trine 5: A Clockwork Conspiracy. So this is a bit interesting. The Trine series, when it first launched, didn't really garner a lot of attention, right? It was a decent three character puzzler, very much like the Lost Vikings from Blizzard way back in the early 90s. And it had its fans, but it wasn't until the second game when they really sort of hit their stride, essentially. The third game got a lot of attention because they changed the visual style of the game. It went from this sort of like 2D locked down view to like this sort of 2.5D semi 3D world, and the fans of the series weren't really that happy, but it did bring in more players. Then for the longest time they said they were done with it, they weren't going to do any more, and then they announced Trine 4. So yeah, and then when people thought, okay, that's going to be the end of it, and now they've announced a fifth game in the franchise. This one is coming sometime in the future. There is no date for it yet, so it's it's out in 2023. We just don't know when. It's been announced, but there is no date. So it is unlikely to be in 2023. but when it does come out, it'll hit all the platforms. So it will come to, you know, PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, Series X and S, PC and Switch. Let me just jump in trailer-wise here just so we can get into some bit of a gameplay thing for it. But again, so, you know, you're playing, you know, as Amadeus, Zoya, and Pontius. Same skills as before. Obviously, they'll have new abilities because it's a new game. Hey, Mr. Tam. Yes, it is a very, very good series, especially if you like sort of puzzle games that require you to think about character placement as well as the actual puzzles themselves. So you can generally pick the series up for, you know, like $5 to $10 a game on Steam. They're not all that expensive when they're on sale. They are also on all the consoles. So there was a triple pack, like a quad pack on Switch. The case is behind me, you know, so they do exist that way as well. But again, there's just no date for when this one is releasing. Moving away from the world of Trine, we're going to dive into Star Wars because there was a lot of information that came out of Star Wars Celebration over the weekend just gone. And we're going to dive in first with a look at the Ahsoka trailer. I say we're going to look at the trailer, but I'm not going to play the trailer because, again, spoilers. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who may be, you know, wanting to experience it for themselves. The big thing with the Ahsoka trailer is they tried being cagey with the reveal of a potential character. You know, they're all, oh, you know, this character's here, who knows what'll happen. And then the day after that, they confirmed that the character was there. So in the show, we know Ahsoka is there, obviously. We know Sabine Wren is there because she was at Star Wars Celebration last year. And we know that Hera Syndulla, who's the Twi'lek captain of the Ghost ship, she's there being played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who, funnily enough, married Obi-Wan Kenobi last year. You know, I want to say Ramona from... not Ramona. From Scott Pilgrim, the girl that he's in love with. Ramona, yeah. That's her. She's playing Hera in the live-action series. And again, you know, Chopper's in there as well. So this is you know, her as Hera. Obviously, you know, the whole, you know, Leku tentacle things is always weird in live action because they have to look real, but they can't be heavy for the actors. So we'll see what happens there. We do have a little bit of information on this guy, but I won't go into it. He's wielding an orange lightsaber, so it's not the traditional blue or green for a Jedi or the straight red for a Sith, but it is an orange one, and there is some significance to that color, but again, I won't go into it, just in case you've not seen Star Wars Rebels. They sort of dive into some of that mythology a little bit, and same in Clone Wars. This is the back of the character's head that people were going on about. This is Grand Admiral Thrawn. He originally started out as an extended universe character post Return of the Jedi in the books and everything, which when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they basically said, no, it's only the movies and the Clone Wars TV series are canon. Everything else we're ignoring, right? We're, you know, keep that as what we call now legends, but it's not timeline accurate. They reintroduced the character in Rebels as sort of basically somebody working for the Emperor, you know, pushing, you know, this burgeoning rebellion to the brink, and they've now brought him back. And Lars Mikkelsen, who voiced the character in Rebels, is also playing the character in the live-action show. What is interesting is his brother Mads Mikkelsen he played Jyn Erso's father in Rogue One. There's the designer of the Death Star, and he's also in Indiana Jones coming out this year. So so Mads was the guy who built the Death Star. Lars is the guy that, you know, is, you know, chasing down anyone who threatens the Empire. Kind of funny that way. People sort of freaked out with this droid. I'm gonna say it's wrong, but it's like Hunyan. He is the droid that helps younglings build their first lightsabers. Sort of gives them the guiding principles of what they need to know, and it's voiced by David Tennant. So he popped in, did, you know, a couple of lines in some Clone Wars episodes, and he's back now in Ahsoka. There is obviously a lot more in there. We've seen Chopper in the show. We know this is set sometime after the episode in season 2 of The Mandalorian, where Ahsoka popped up and revealed that Grogu's name was Grogu. Beyond that, we don't know where it fits in the timeline of The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, because between the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian and the start of season 3, it's been about 2 years in terms of the timeline in Star Wars. So Grogu wasn't with Luke Skywalker for all of 2 weeks or anything. He was there for a good couple of years. So who knows how this ties into that. But it also will tie in to a story we'll get to in a moment. Something else that's pretty cool that came out of the convention is that LEGO are releasing a couple of new dioramas for the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi. So it literally in like a week and a half, Star Wars Return of the Jedi, or Star Wars Episode 6 Return of the Jedi, depending on how you want to call it, will officially be 40 years old. So they've got 2 new dioramas. They've done a few dioramas before, the trash compactor scene. There was another one. I literally put them here: Death Star, Trench Run, and Dagobah, right? So the first big one is the Emperor's Throne Room, which is literally just a little sort of section of the throne room. Comes with the 3 minifigures that you can see. And the second one is the Endor Speeder Chase. So it's the same sort of thing. You've got a couple of minifigs, a couple of speeder bikes, and some trees. These are basically like scenes from the movie, just in Lego form. The Endor Speeder Chase is $130, and the throne room is $160. The reason why this is sort of important is because it hasn't been confirmed here yet, but in other parts of the world, Return of the Jedi will be going back to cinemas to celebrate its 40th anniversary. So for a great many Star Wars fans, this will be the first time it's viewable in cinemas. This movie released, 18 months before I was born, and even when they did the special editions, that wasn't something that they put on in Australian cinemas. So it is very, very interesting, and we'll have to wait and see if they're doing it, but it's cool if they're going to bring that to the screens here in Australia. Moving away from movies, we're going to go into games, and we got a new trailer for Star Wars Jedi Survivor. So this is the final trailer for that. This game launches in 2 weeks. So, it's going to be a very, very, very busy, period for Star Wars fans over the next few weeks. This, again, does have some spoilery elements, so I won't play the trailer because there's a couple of characters in here that will spoil things. Something that is in the trailer that they highlight a little more. We've seen glimpses of it in other trailers, but something in this one that's very cool is what they call the companion system. So they've not explained how the companions work in a grander sense, but there are some times when you'll have somebody with you on a mission. It may be for the length of the mission, it may be for a specific point of the mission, but they can help you out. And so they can help you out in combat, they can help you solve puzzles, and all sorts of things like that. The game is coming out on the 28th of April for both for PC, Xbox Series X and S, and PlayStation 5. If you are in Australia and you're looking to pick up the game, there is a PC version of it in stores. What is interesting is the PC version, because Australian retailers tend to discount things for the first week or so. There's one retailer that's doing it as $30 less than the price to buy it direct on Steam or Epic Game Store. So if you are looking to pick up this game on PC and you don't mind having to go into a store on release day to buy a physical, and I'll put that in air quotes there, copy of the game, which is basically a code in the box, you can get the game for $30 less than what the price is on Steam, which I think will be a very, very good saving for you. The other story that I want to dive in just quickly is, there's no real information on it, but that is Star Wars Tales of the Jedi was announced as getting a second season. So literally the quote from Dave Filoni during the panel where they announced it was, he just said, "Tales of the Jedi was so fun the first time, I've decided to do some more." That's it. That's all we got. We didn't get a new logo, we didn't get a time frame, we didn't get who the characters are on, just that he's going to do more. Tales of the Jedi is a compendium of 6 short episodes of animation. 3 episodes were dedicated to Ahsoka, 3 episodes were dedicated to Count Dooku. So for example, Ahsoka, the first episode is about her as a baby, how she, shows off that she has Force powers. The second episode is about her being trained, essentially relentlessly by Anakin Skywalker, saying how if you're so intent on being on the front lines, you need to be able to defend yourself if you're surrounded by droids. So he puts her in the middle of a whole bunch of clones, like, a dozen or so clones, and she has to deflect a whole bunch of stunning shots from them. And if she gets clipped, she gets knocked out. So that sort of sets up how she managed to avoid being hit by any of the clones when Order 66 was executed, because she spent time training. And then the third episode is her visiting Naboo for the funeral of Padme. And she meets Bail Organa, and they set off to do, the rebellion. And then that leads into her role in Rebels and all sorts of stuff. The Count Dooku side of things is more about how he started to become disillusioned by the Jedi Order. So basically how he went from being a Jedi to being a grey Jedi to being no Jedi at all. So they've done some fun stuff with them. They're only, 6-7 minutes long. They're not very long, each of the episodes. So you can definitely knock them out in, 40 minutes. But it's something different, because it's not this grand epic story where you need to focus for 4 seasons to understand what is happening. This is the single point that you need to focus on. It's a few minutes and off you go. Something that I think is cool is Qui-Gon Jinn appears in the Count Dooku series, because Qui-Gon Jinn was the Padawan of Dooku. And then he's actually voiced by Liam Neeson's son, because he sounds a lot like a young Liam Neeson apparently. So yeah, that's something that I thought was kind of cool. Moving back into the world of TV, we actually got a few details on The Acolyte, the new live-action series set in the High Republic era of Star Wars. So there was some footage released, and I have seen it because, I'm a naughty guy and I did look at some leaks. But the big thing with The Acolyte is they showed off the cast, which we already knew about. That was announced back in November. We got confirmation that there will be a Jedi Master as a Wookiee. This is not the first time it's happened, as again, there was, stuff in Legends where they had that, but this is the first time it's happened inside of, the official canon now. But the big thing is, this is set during the High Republic, and the High Republic ended about 100 years before the Phantom Menace begins, right? So the High Republic is essentially, there's no Sith, there's, thousands upon thousands of Jedi. The galaxy is essentially at peace, right? This is the High Republic in a grand sense. But there are books, audiobooks, short stories, comics that have introduced new characters, new dangers, new planets, new everything. The only character from the Star Wars that people have seen so far that will appear in the High Republic is Yoda. During sort of the ending era of the High Republic, he's 600-700 years old, and we know he lives to over 900 because that's when he passes away on Dagobah. So you're not going to hear about the Skywalkers, you're not going to hear about Emperor Palpatine or Senator Palpatine or Supreme Chancellor Palpatine or anything like that. It's just Yoda and what his role is. They did show off, they've had a few shorts out already, and they showed off a full trailer for it. But there is a kids show called Young Jedi Adventures, which is set in the High Republic era. And that's aimed at preschoolers, right? That's, 6 and under. It's Star Wars for them. So they showed that off. But this is the first time we're going to see the High Republic in live action. And this isn't, about a new Jedi coming to be. This is, the bad guys and their time to shine. So the creator of this show is Leslie Headland, who created Russian Doll for Netflix, which is still going strong. People love that show. The big thing is, again, so Jonas Sutumo here, he played Chewbacca in the sequel trilogy and in Solo, A Star Wars Story. He's playing, what's his name? Kalnaka, sorry. He's the Jedi Master. Carrie-Anne Moss is in here. Lee Jung-jae from Squid Games is in the show. So there's a sort of a lot going on with that. The show for this one won't be released until 2024. They only started filming it in November of last year. So, they've only had 4 months sort of under their belt once you accommodate for, the holiday break. Same thing with Andor. Andor is sometime next year. They're filming that now. They'll go into post-production on that one soon as well. So, the Acolyte looks to be quite interesting. Again, it's focusing on the bad guys. So while the Jedi will be there, the High Republic will be in there, and all that sort of stuff, they're focusing more on the baddies of it all. We don't know who's playing the baddies. We don't know what the threat is, anything like that. We just know it's focusing on them. Moving on from that, though, now I want to dive into sort of perhaps the biggest story from Star Wars Celebration. That is that 3 new movies were announced, and all of them will be set in a different era of Star Wars. So the 3 movies in question, we don't have titles or release dates or anything like that, but you can see here on the screen the directors are James Mangold, who directed Logan recently, and is finishing up Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which is coming out in end of June. Dave Filoni on the side there with the cowboy hat. He's directing as well. And then Shanae Obadiah, I can never remember her name, and I apologize. Shameen Obadiah Chinoy, she's directing one as well. Now the big thing is with James Mangold's story, he is literally taking us back to the start of the Jedi. So this will be some 25,000 years in the past. How long in the past, we don't know. We just know it's going to be around the formation of the Jedi and sort of the discovery of their abilities. Dave Filoni's movie is going to be set around the timeline of The Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, and Ahsoka, and will sort of tie into all those. And then Shameen's movie is going to be set after the events of Episode 9, and will feature a Jedi Master rebuilding the Order. The Jedi Master in question for this one is Daisy Ridley. So we can pop this up here. So Daisy Ridley walked out on stage to confirm that she will be back in Star Wars in a 4th movie, playing the new Jedi Master building the Order. So it's all very exciting stuff. Now, the reason why the James Mangold movie is important is because it sets up the Old Republic. So anyone who's ever played Knights of the Old Republic, or Knights of the Old Republic 2, Sith Lords, or even the Old Republic, the MMO, this movie is set in that time period. Now that time period, unfortunately, is some 20,000 years. So it could be the very first day of the Old Republic in terms of their history. It could be the last 5 years of the Old Republic. We don't really know. But what Lucasfilm did do, is they put this photo up on stage, which sort of indicates the eras of Star Wars. And now I'll run through it just quickly. Everything in Star Wars is considered, they play things on what they call BBY, or Before the Battle of Yavin. The Battle of Yavin is where Luke Skywalker destroyed the Death Star, right above the moon that orbited Yavin. So that's sort of where they do timeline-wise. So everything is BBY and everything that's post Battle of Yavin, right? So the Old Republic, as I said, is about 25,000 years before that event, and it falls around 4,000 years before the event. So the High Republic runs for 21,000 years, and then between 4,000 years and 500 years before the Battle of Yavin, there's no real defined era yet. Who knows what will happen? The High Republic era hits around 500 years before the battle and ends about 100 years before the Phantom Menace begins, right? So that's when basically the High Republic either starts to fall or has fallen. So James Mangold's movie will take place in the Old Republic. The Acolyte will take place in the High Republic. Young Jedi Adventures takes place in the High Republic as well. The Fall of the Jedi era is the prequel movies. So Phantom Menace, Clone Wars, and Revenge of the Sith. The Clone Wars animated series and the Clone Wars movie is also part of that era. The Reign of the Empire era is the time between episodes 3 and episodes 4. So this is Star Wars Rebels, Star Wars, Obi-Wan, Solo, A Star Wars Story, Andor, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and Star Wars Jedi Survivor are all in that period. The Age of Rebellion is considered the original trilogy era. So the actual timeline between, episode 4 and episode 6 is only about 4 years. It's not a whole lot of time, in that era, in that timeline. But that's those three, movies. That's really all that's there. The New Republic era is the post Episode 6 to the beginning of Episode 7. So this is The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and Ahsoka. That's where that is, and that's where Dave Filoni's movie is going to appear. And then the final one is the Rise of the First Order era, which is, the sequel trilogy. And we don't know how close to the sequel trilogy this new movie from Shamin with Daisy Ridley will be. We know it takes place, like 10 years after the events of Episode 9. We just don't know if it's connected in that era or if that's the start of a new era, right? They've not confirmed that. Now, all that sounds amazing, right? 3 new movies, one focusing on the dawn of the Jedi, one focusing on, the period that we're seeing a lot of shows for on Disney Plus, and one literally continuing the story of Rey. The problem that I have with this is that they've announced a lot of movies that have never come to fruition. So for the longest time there was going to be an Obi-Wan movie, and then the Solo movie came out and it bombed, right? I think it did some $470 million globally, which for Star Wars, especially when all the others hit $1 billion, it just didn't do well, right? In December of 2020, Patty Jenkins I'm hoping they're starting a new era too. So in December of 2020, Patty Jenkins, the director of Wonder Woman, did a fancy video of her roller skating, where she said, "Hey, I'm going to do a Rogue Squadron movie." That movie got put on the back burner while she was working on Wonder Woman 3. Wonder Woman 3 got canned, so she picked this back up again. But there's been no confirmation that the movie's back in production. We've heard it's been cancelled, we've heard it's going ahead, there's just nothing, and there's no confirmation from Lucasfilm on it. In May of 2020, Taika Waititi was announced to be directing a new Star Wars movie. After that was done, we knew he was doing Thor: Love and Thunder. People just assumed once Thor was done and out the gate, he'd move on to Star Wars. Instead, he's moved on to a soccer movie about a team. I keep saying Uganda, but I don't think it's Uganda. But the team did some 31 or 32-0 in the World Cup. They just got decimated. So that's sort of, what he's supposed to be working on. But again, like everything else, there's just no word on what he's doing. Star Wars: The Last Jedi director Rian Johnson was announced to be working on a new trilogy. He then went ahead and directed Knives Out for Netflix, and then that was part of a 3-picture deal for them. So he's done the first 2 with Knives Out, and then Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery. So still a third one to go. And the rumor is once he's done with that, he'll then head back to Star Wars. But again, no confirmation. And then the other trilogy of movies that was expected was from the Game of Thrones showrunner. So the guys that brought Game of Thrones from the page to the screen, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. That deal fell through, and they got, started working on things for Netflix. We've also had reports of Sean Levy, who, recently directed Free Guy. He's currently directing Deadpool 3. He also oversaw the Night at the Museum movies. He was supposed to be working on something. And we also saw, Kevin Feige was heavily rumored to be working on something for Star Wars. That one, they've said no, he's focusing on Marvel. Don't expect him to do anything Star Wars, but that's something to sort of take into consideration. There was also a report that Damon Lindelof, who's a screenwriter and a producer, was working on something for Star Wars. But the rumor for that one was that Shamin Obaid-Chinoy would be directing it, and it would be set after the events of Rise of Skywalker. So that is highly likely the movie that's already now being confirmed is happening, with her directing it and that time period. But if we look at this list, right, we've got Patty Jenkins, Taika Waititi, Sean Levy, Rian Johnson, and David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, sort of all working on Star Wars movies that have gone nowhere. And you could argue that they're not going to be the movies that people wanted, so they're retooling them and all that sort of stuff. But it's like, I personally absolutely adore the Rogue Squadron series, both games and comics, right? I own probably too many of the comics, and I own all the games. and I look every now and again to see if somebody's uploaded a torrent of the Wii version of the Rogue Squadron trilogy, right? Because I want that. So I'm a massive fan of those games. So a movie based on that was always going to appeal to me. But, again, it's now 2.5 years since that announcement, and we have no word on what's happening with it. So, who knows what's going to happen with it. Again, the issue that I have is that they keep announcing these movies and then nothing ever happens with them. So, to put it in context, Taika Waititi's movie was announced at the same time that Leslie Heslin's show The Acolyte was. The Acolyte is now in production. It has a full cast. We've seen footage of it, whereas Taika Waititi's movie is non-existent. And yes, people could argue that it's much harder to make a movie. It's like, yes, it is harder to make a movie than a TV show, but at the same time, it's not hard to, confirm you're working on something. So we'll have to wait and see on that one, if it's going to go any further than those two. Moving on from that, before I get too ranty, we're going to dive back into the world of animation with some good news. The first is that The Bad Batch will be back for a third and final season on Disney Plus in 2024. I will not talk about the ending of season 2, in case you haven't watched it. But The Bad Batch picks up essentially as Order 66 is sent out by the Emperor, or, depending on your position on his role at that point, the Supreme Chancellor. They refuse to shoot somebody because that's what the Bad Batch do. They don't follow orders blindly. The youngling, or the Padawan that gets away from them at that point, ends up becoming Kanan Jarrus, who's the Jedi that trains Ezra in Star Wars Rebels. Ezra then warps away with Grand Admiral Thrawn, using the space whales that Grogu sees in the second episode, or first or second episode of season 2 of the Mandalorian, season 3 of the Mandalorian. So it's all, parts within parts within parts. So season 2 of the Bad Batch had them fighting up doing new missions, fighting new enemies. We also got a few episodes focused on Crosshair, who was separate from, the rest of the batch, because he did follow orders. Beyond that, I won't say any more. But again, we have a new villain in Dr. Hemlock, who's doing stuff with cloning, which obviously ties in with some of the stuff we've seen in The Mandalorian with the cloning. They're all obsessed with clones in this show. In this galaxy, I should say. So that's something to consider as well. The other show that also we got details on was Star Wars Vision Volume 2, which we got a trailer for it, which shows off a host of, the different shorts. The first Star Wars Visions was more focused on Japanese animation studios, so a lot of the stuff sort of looked similar because that's the style Japan goes for. This one is very, very different because we have Aardman Animation from London, who Wallace and Gromit. There was a Brazilian studio. So Mr. Tam, if you've not seen Star Wars Visions, it's very much like, if you remember the Animatrix, which was a whole bunch of shorts for the Matrix movie when they decided to try and make that a big thing. So they all have this unique look about them, right? Because it's not, there's no preset, it has to look like this because this is Star Wars. It's no, these studios have their art style, they have their way of doing things, so they get to make things that they want. Some of these shorts, like everything from season 1 or volume 1 of Visions, was all done with a full Japanese cast and then a full English dub. For these ones, the show that's made in Brazil has a Brazilian cast. The show that's made in Portugal has a Portuguese cast, right? So there are English dubs, but there are also native versions of them. So if we move away from the trailer for a second, so we know, so this is the title of the show, the title of the episode, and then the studio. So Sith is by Studio El Guri, and that's literally the one that opened up the shot there with the two people with the lightsabers. Essentially, that's what it is. It is Love, Death, and Robots, but it's Love, Death Stars, and Droids. Screech's Reach by Cartoon Saloon. And then, so we've actually got like the cast for him, like Angelica Houston is in that show as the Sith Mother. In the Stars is by Punk Robot. I Am Your Mother is by Aardman. So this is, one of the shots from Aardman. Dennis Lawson is actually reprising his role as Wedge Antilles, a role that he played in the 3 Star Wars movies in 70s and 80s. He also replayed the role in Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader on the GameCube, so he was there for that. So that's another one to look out for. Journey to the Dark Side is by Studio Mer. That is a Korean studio. So this is, again, we've got the Korean cast, and then we've got the English cast. The Spy Dancer by Studio La Chalette. But The Bandits of Golak by 88 Pictures. The next one, I should say, is called The Pit by D'Art Studio and Lucasfilm. So Lucasfilm, they've not been involved in any of them in terms of actually creating them, but this one they were. And you can tell this one has sort of, they've got things. So Matthew Wood is back as doing Stormtrooper voices. He's the voice of the Roger Roger droids. If you've seen it, Phantom Menace, all the droids that go Roger Roger, that's him. And then Ayu's Song by Triggerfish. So I just put this up. These are the studios that are doing them. So as I said, Volume 1 was more traditional Japanese animation. Volume 2 is a more global affair. So it is very, very cool. I am excited to see what they're going to do with this, because the first volume, some of them, they're a little harder to get into because they're not the Star Wars we know, but some of them are also just absolutely fantastic. I think the first episode is The Wandering Samurai. It's like a black and white animation where it looks like a Kurosawa film, until we see droids, and then the samurai pulls out a lightsaber, right? And given that Star Wars was heavily inspired by some films by Kurosawa, it's sort of a bit of a come full circle moment. The other sort of news from Star Wars Celebration in London is that Star Wars Celebration 2025 has been announced and will be taking place in Japan. So April 18th to April 20th, which is literally the Easter weekend in 2025, is when this will take place. So about 2 years from now. If you're thinking, hey, we had one last year and we had one this year, why isn't there one in 2024? The Star Wars Celebration that took place in Anaheim, just sort of south of Los Angeles last year, was actually delayed out from 2021 because of the pandemic. So they were able to hold it the year after. So they had a lot of news they needed to sort of get out, and that's why they did it. The one before then was the 2019 show in Chicago. They do these every 2 years. So this will be in Tokyo. It is in the, I'm going to butcher the name of this too. It is in the Makuhari Messe Convention Center, which is located about a 25-minute train ride east of Tokyo Disney, which itself is about 20 minutes out of Tokyo Station in Japan. Again, it is literally on the 18th, 19th, and 20th, so it is Good Friday, Easter Saturday, and Easter Sunday. The one in London ran for 4 days. This one's only going to be for 3 days. No idea when tickets will be on sale for it. No idea about, if they're doing anything for international travelers or anything like that. We just know when it will be and where it will be. All right. That brings us to the end of the Star Wars news. Again, there was a lot of it because, they sort of do these things every 2 years, and so they had some stuff to share. I will say there was obviously a lot of panels. So there's a Bad Batch panel where they talk about season 2 of the show. They talk about their favorite moments. There was a villains panel. There was a Kenobi panel. So they had Ewan McGregor was there. Hayden Christensen was there, and the young girl that played Princess Leia, she was there as well. So they went sort of deep into all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so there's a lot of stuff. It is all on StarWars.com and their YouTube channel. You can watch the whole streams back, because they have, when they're not showing the panels, they have micro interviews, like 8-10 minute interviews with people on the main stage, and they show off a lot of things like the toys that Hasbro were talking about, books, games, tattoos, jewelry. There's a lot of stuff from the show. So if you're interested, that is there to check out. Moving back into the world of games, we're going to go through a couple of subscription services, specifically PlayStation Plus and Ubisoft Plus. So PlayStation Plus announced the other day their April lineup. So these games will be available sort of on Tuesday next week. Usually the week after they announce them is when they get added to the service. So these are for the extra and the deluxe tiers for the game catalog. So if you're on either of those tiers, you get these. If you're on the deluxe, you get a few extra titles as well. So it's a very Bethesda month. We've got Wolfenstein, Dooms, Dishonored. So we'll go through it. So just quickly, all these games are both PS4 and PS5 versions. So if you have a PlayStation 5, you can take full advantage of them. If you just have a PS4, you're sorted either way. But Kenna Bridge of Spirits, Doom Eternal, Riders Republic, Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, Sackboy: A Big Adventure, Bassmaster Fishing, Paradise Killer, which is done here in Australia. Those are all PS5 optimized, so they'll take full advantage of the console and the controller. PS4 only titles, so they will work on the PS5. They're just not going to take full advantage of everything that console offers. The Evil Within, Wolfenstein: The Old Blood, Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus, Slay the Spire. They're the other ones in the game catalog. If you are a PlayStation Deluxe member, so you're paying for the premium service, they're adding Doom 1, the original Doom, Doom 2, Doom 3, and Doom 64 into it, and Dishonored Game of the Year Edition. So, essentially, if you're a Bethesda fan, this is the month for you. And it's kind of interesting that all these games being added, because people keep saying about the whole Microsoft buying Bethesda that nothing's going to happen. It seems to be not the case. They're quite happy to support it. Interestingly, Xbox announced it all the time. Hey, these games are being removed. This is the first time we've seen it actually announced from PlayStation. So on the 15th of May, so there's still a month to go for these, but Marvel Spider-Man, Resident Evil, and NBA 2K Playgrounds 2 and more titles will be removed from the service. There's no specific list yet. There is a section in the game catalog where you can select them and say, hey, what's going away, and they'll tell you. But PlayStation themselves haven't released the list yet. I just don't think it's finalized because, again, it is a couple of weeks away. Moving into the world of Ubisoft Plus, today it actually launched on Xbox. So Ubisoft Plus was launched like 2 years ago for PC, and it's just like Game Pass for Xbox and PlayStation Plus tiers for the PS5 and all that, where you pay your subscription fee and you get access on PC to a bunch of Ubisoft titles. PlayStation 5 or PlayStation Plus tier owners, the people that have the game catalog, do get access to Ubisoft Plus games, but it's just the base game, right? So they'll get Assassin's Creed Origins, but it's just that. Whereas on Ubisoft Plus on PC, members get the base game and then all the expansions, right? So PlayStation 5, it's included as part of the price. It's part of that bundle. Whereas Xbox, it's separate. So you don't need to be a Game Pass member to have access to Ubisoft Plus on Xbox. You just need to have an internet connection. But there are a few little caveats here, right? On PC, it is $19.95 Australian for the service. On Xbox, it's $23.95 because it is technically called Ubisoft Plus Multi-Access. So the reason why it's called that is because if you subscribe for Xbox, you get both the Xbox for Series XS and Xbox One. You get the service there. And you also get the PC version. So you're getting both PC and Xbox platforms if you subscribe with the Xbox. If you subscribe on PC only, you only get the PC version, you don't get Xbox. But unlike the PlayStation version, where it's just the base game, on Xbox, it's the game and all the expansions. So you're getting the full breakdown of content from the PC service just on Xbox. Unfortunately, there is no way just to have Xbox only, right? There's no $20 tier for Xbox and no PC. It is $20 on PC only or $24 on Xbox, which includes PC. I know it's convoluted and I don't know why Ubisoft have done it this way, but that's the way they decided to do it. Today at launch, there are 60 games available. So Anno 1800, which is a next-gen only game, so it's not available on Xbox One. That just launched like 3 weeks ago, so that's now available. All the Assassin's Creeds, so here, Assassin's Creed Origins, the Gold Edition, Assassin's Creed Syndicate Gold Edition, right? Bunch of Far Cry games, Rainbow Six Extraction, Rainbow Six Siege, Starlink, Battle for Atlas, which is a fantastic game, the Crew titles, the Division titles, Trivial Pursuit Live, Watch Dogs, all those sort of the big, sort of more recent ones are there. On PC, they do include some indie titles, not all, it's not like a massive library, but they have some additional ones in there. The big other thing too with this is that it is cross-platform progression. So if you say download Watch Dogs 2 on your Xbox and you put 40 hours into it and your Xbox carks it, so you need to then get, send it away for service or somebody borrows it or whatever. If you have a PC that can play the game, if you sign into Ubisoft on your PC and then you jump into the game, your progress transfers across. So all the games that are both on Xbox and PC, if you have the multi-access tier, will grant you cross progression for all of them, which I think is a very cool thing. I just wish there was an Xbox only version of the service, because otherwise if you're paying multi-access and you don't own a PC, you're not actually getting anything for it, you're just getting the Xbox version. So obviously that was a lot of stuff to sort of get through, because that was a lot of stuff, but it is important to know about it because it is a very cool way to sort of get access to a bunch of games for a relatively low cost. If you are a Game Pass Ultimate member, which gets you console and PC from Xbox, EA Play is included in that. If not, you can get EA Play separately. But let's say you get Game Pass Ultimate and Ubisoft Multi-Access, you're looking at around $40 a month for those two services. And yes, you get EA as part of it, but so obviously there's a lot of games in there. Some games that are in Ubisoft Ubisoft Plus Multi-Access are also inside of Game Pass. So there's technically some double up, but games will leave Game Pass from Ubisoft, but they'll stay with. So games from Ubisoft will leave Game Pass, but they will remain within the Ubisoft service. There we go. Right, moving on just quickly because I don't want to dive into it too much. Final Fantasy 16 had a state of play presentation this morning, and they went through roughly 25 minutes of gameplay information. So for obvious reasons, I'm not going to play the presentation now because there was a lot in there. The four callouts from it we were highlighting is that there are hideaway advisors. So the hideaway, which is your base essentially, there will be people there that will give you information, that will give you help. So they announced a few more of those. They also revealed the training function, which will let you practice combat without having to go out into the world and try and fight enemy after enemy. There's what they're calling hunts, which when you want to leave the hideaway and not go on a big mission, these where you can just go around and monster hunter the game. And then finally they showed off a bunch of new combat skills and all that in some footage. They also revealed the singer for the game's theme song, and I cannot remember the name, and I do apologize for that one, but that's sort of a big deal. Again, it is a 25-minute video. I'll pop the link for it in the chat, because again, if you do care for Final Fantasy, this is definitely the way to learn about it. Now we're just going to dive into the two games that got delayed this week. One is kind of, okay, it got delayed, and the other is a bit of a sad one. The first one is that Endless Dungeon, which was due out in just a few weeks, is now being delayed till October. So Endless Dungeon is being done by Amplitude Studios. It's part of the Endless series. It's a separate thing. It's not part of the main series. It's sort of a spin-off of it. It is a roguelike top-down shooter. It was, in development for quite a long time. They kept delaying, the release window. They finally dated it a few months ago for May. They've now just said, hey, we need more time. We're delaying it till October. Unfortunately, if you're a Switch player, it's been delayed even further. The May release was for all platforms. The new October release date is for PC, Xbox, and PlayStation only. Switch owners do not have a date yet. It could still be the 19th. It could be November, December, January next year. There's no set date for it, unfortunately, at this point. So that's one of them. The other game that was delayed was announced this morning, and that is that Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League has lost its May 26th release date and now will release on February 2nd, 2024. Given the less than welcoming reaction to the footage from the state of play back in February, it doesn't surprise me that this has been delayed. The message from the team just says, "We've made the tough but necessary decision to take the time needed to work on getting the game to be the best quality experience for players. Thank you to our amazing community for the continued support, patience, and understanding. There is much more to share in the months ahead, and we look forward to seeing you in Metropolis next year." This one is particularly interesting because when they debuted it, the gameplay looked fine, but it looked generic. Like, there wasn't anything special about it. Then, they said, oh, and there's a battle pass because, cosmetics, right? People went, well, we don't really want a battle pass. And then they said, yes, and it's also online only. Even if you're playing completely solo, you don't play with a single person, you have to be online. Now, normally online games there's a reason to be online, right? But then there are some games that have you online even though you don't need to play with other people. One of them, for example, is Super Mario Run on iPhone, all mobile devices. That requires you to have an internet connection. So if you're on a plane, you can't play that game. And Nintendo say it's for piracy reasons, to make sure that you don't counterfeit the game. And it's like, well, not really a big thing on iPhones, but sure. So, there are countless games that you can play completely solo. Destiny, The Division, The Crew. These games, they thrive and they feel alive when you're playing with other people, but they also acknowledge that you don't, have to play with other people, right? But unfortunately, they require you to be online at all times, which doesn't make sense to me. If I'm playing The Division completely solo, I shouldn't be required to be connected to the internet, but that's the way they've done it. With this one, people just didn't see why, and unfortunately, Warner Brothers and Rocksteady didn't make a reasonable summary as to why. But I want to just dive into the timeline for this one just a little bit. So the game was first announced back in August of 2020 at the DC Fandom event, which was DC's way of saying, hey, you're all stuck at home, so are our celebrities, here's a bunch of pre-recorded stuff, right? It wasn't a great event because it was like 3.5 hours in length, but they did dive into a lot of things. Studios being transparent, Mr. Tam, 100% agree with. And being delayed, I have no issue with that. The old Miyamoto quote keeps popping up, and it's one of those things where I don't think anyone can ever confirm if it's him or not, where they say, where he says, a delayed game will eventually be good, but a rushed game will always be bad. Cyberpunk is a perfect example. That game now is phenomenal. When it launched, it was a piece of hot mess, and that's all anyone ever remembers of it. Back to this one though. So August of 2020 is when the game was announced. When they announced it, they said it was going to be a 2022 title, right? Then it went over a year of silence between the August 2020 reveal and the October DC Fandom event in 2021, where we got another trailer. Then at the end of 2021, the game popped up at the Game Awards, Jeff Keighley's show, and they said 2022 was the year that would release, which is fine. They're still sticking to that 2022 window. Then in March of 2022, they delayed the game a full 12 months, saying it wouldn't release until the spring in the Northern Hemisphere of 2023, so for us, autumn. Then they were a bit coy because they went silent again, right? And when I say silent, I don't mean they didn't release new footage. I meant, they didn't do anything. There was no socials, nothing. Then, they announced before the State of Play earlier in this year that there was going to be more for it, right? Hey, we've got stuff coming, pay attention. There was like a 15-minute section of the State of Play was dedicated to this game, and the reaction was not good. Since then, they've been completely silent. And then what is interesting is that rumors popped up about a month afterwards, sort of mid-March, that the game was going to be delayed. Now, Warner Brothers hadn't said anything at this point, but they were saying, hey, we're going to, we've heard this game's being delayed till October. Other people said, no, it's 2024. The big sort of prevailing thing was that if it was delayed to later in 2023, there was no way they would remove any of the live service elements, any of the Battle Pass stuff, because it wouldn't work, right? They couldn't do anything for that. Couldn't change that much game in that short of time. People said if they wanted to make massive changes, it had to be a full year's delay, which is essentially what we've got. It's being delayed 10 months, right? Or 9 months from when it would have released. So it's kind of interesting, this game, which, sat essentially in silence for 3 years, finally got a release date, only for people to hate on the game astronomically loudly, so much so that they delayed it another year. It's not obviously a great thing for them. It's not a horrible decision. Again, I'm always happy for a game to be delayed, whether or not it's because they need to give the developers a rest, whether it's not because they need more time to fix things, whatever it happens to be, a delay means the game will eventually launch in a better state. And I feel Nintendo's probably one of the only few developers these days that doesn't do massive day one patches for their games, because they make sure their games are ready to go beforehand, which, with Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, right? That was announced in 2019, and it's still not out. I mean, obviously it's coming out in a month, but, for context of the story, it's not out yet. So, the expectation for that was 2021, then they delayed it to 2022, then they dated it last year for 2023. So things like that always happen. So I'm happy for developers to delay games to make sure that things are working the way they need to. I just sort of wish that they wouldn't say pointless reasons for why. If it's because they need to adjust the gameplay, if they need to, do things to make it better, that's fine. Just say that. Just don't say it's because of the expectations of the community. It's like, I've seen some people comment that they loved what was shown, right? They're happy with everything that's there. So yeah, it getting delayed so much isn't the issue. It's sort of the fact that this is now, it'll almost be 10 years between. So it's Batman Arkham Knight released in 2015. That was the last game from Rocksteady. This is their next game, and we're at 8 years now. So by the time it comes out, it'll just be shy of 9 years. So 9 years to release one game, and so far this is the game we're getting. It doesn't look well. It doesn't bode well for the studio. Right, moving away from that, we're going to dive into the games that are coming out over the next sort of 7 days. Today was sort of a big one. The Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection released for PC, Switch, and PS4. But next week is going to be a big one. So on the 18th of April, which is next Tuesday, we'll see God of Rock release for all platforms. That is it's Rock Band meets Street Fighter is the best way I can describe that one. Also on the 18th, The Mage Seeker, a League of Legends story, will release for all platforms. That is, think pixelated Hades, but set within the world of League of Legends. And also on the 18th, we'll see the release of Minecraft Legends for all platforms. So no matter what platform you're on next Tuesday, there should be something for you to enjoy. The day after, we'll finally see the release of Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster for both Switch and PS4. It launched last year for PC and mobile. It's now finally coming to consoles. The big thing with this one, obviously, is that there is a font option, so you can go from the new font to the old style font if you choose. You can also swap from the new soundtrack to the classic soundtrack. You can also turn off random encounters. You can put on an XP boost, so you can get like 4 times the amount of XP in battles. So if you really just want to power through things, you can do it that way. On the 20th, we'll get the release of Arcana of Paradise the Tower for Switch and PC. DNF Duel, a fighting game from Nexon and Arc System Works, will hit Switch on the 20th. And then PC, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S will get Stray Blade as well. And then next Friday is the big one. Switch players will get Advanced Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. And then everyone else will get Dead Island 2 after some 7 years of development and multiple studios working on it. So a big week next week. There is obviously a lot to look forward to, you know, on the Tuesday. There's a lot to look forward to on the Friday, so hopefully there is something there for you. With that all said and done, it does bring us to the end of the show. For all the details, for all the stories we talked about and the ones that didn't make it into the show, be sure to visit Maxi-Geek.au or follow us on your favorite social media platforms. With that said, it means it's time to sign off. So until we see you online next time, happy gaming.